He stood in the doorway, smiling casually, and said the words that would split my life in two. "Babe, Sabrina's moving in for a while. She just needs a place to stay." I stood frozen, coffee mug in hand, heart thudding hard. He thought I wouldn't notice. I noticed everything. Sabrina, the friend from work I'd heard about but never really met. The one he texted late at night with inside jokes. The one whose name popped up on his phone screen just a little too often. I felt the air shift. In the room. My fingers tightened on the mug, and I forced a smile. "Oh? When did you two decide that?" Ethan waved a hand breezily, already walking away. "Just now. She's going through stuff. We're helping her out." "Where?" My chest clenched. The first night she arrived, she breezed through the door like she owned the place, hugging him tightly, laughing softly, her perfume lingering in the hallway long after they passed. I stood at the kitchen counter, watching, feeling something sharp settle deep in my gut. Ethan kissed my cheek lightly before bed, murmuring, "You're amazing. You know that?" I nodded, swallowing hard. My throat was tight. My heart was screaming. But I stayed quiet. The next morning, Lena called, her voice careful. "You okay? You sound off." I told her I was fine. I told her Sabrina was just a friend, that Ethan was just helping. But even as I said it, I felt the lie curl bitterly on my tongue. I sat in our bedroom that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to their laughter echo faintly from downstairs. My hands gripped the bedsheets, knuckles white. I didn't know what was happening yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a friend crashing on the couch. The first week I told myself stories to survive. A girl like me should be grateful, right? Grateful for a husband who's charming and social. Grateful for the chance to help someone. Grateful for the illusion of a stable life. I watched Ethan, and Sabrina move through the house with an ease that made my skin crawl. She wore his hoodies, curled up next to him on the couch, made morning coffee like she'd always belonged here. Every time I caught his eye, he'd smile gently. "She's just comfortable here, babe. Don't overthink it." I wanted to believe him. I clung to the tiny scraps of intimacy we still had, the occasional kiss on the forehead, the quick squeeze of my hand, the murmured, "I love you" before bed. I told myself it was enough, that the discomfort was mine to manage, not his to fix. Lena, sharp as always, wasn't buying it. "Clara, this isn't normal," she said over wine one night. "You need to ask harder questions." I brushed her off, feeling defensive and raw. I didn't want to look like the jealous, paranoid wife, so I kept playing the cool, understanding partner. I let Sabrina take up space. I smiled through the dinners where they shared private jokes. I nodded politely when she called Ethan E, a nickname I'd never even used. But late at night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cracks in my heart widen. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to face it yet. Told myself we were strong enough to weather this. I told myself Ethan loved me, that Sabrina was just a phase, a blip, a temporary guest. But in the quietest moments, I felt the truth whispering under my skin. This wasn't a test of love. This was a rehearsal for betrayal, and I was failing to see it in time. The shift was slow, like a tide creeping in. One night, I walked into the living room to find them sitting too close. Sabrina's legs tucked under her, Ethan's hand resting lightly on the back of the couch. They snapped apart when they saw me laughing awkwardly. He lied, and she smiled. I felt my stomach twist, but I forced a casual laugh. "What's so funny?" Ethan waved a hand. "Oh, just work stuff. You wouldn't get it." His voice was smooth, but his eyes darted away too quickly. I started noticing the small things. His phone face down on the table. late-night errands that didn't need explaining. The way Sabrina's perfume lingered on his clothes, even when I knew they hadn't left the house. I sat on the edge of our bed one night, gripping my phone, debating whether to confront him. I opened a text to Lena, typed, "I think he's cheating," and then deleted it. My chest ached. I didn't want it to be real. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. But the next morning, when I found Sabrina's toothbrush in our bathroom and her laundry mixed with ours, the heartbreak hit like a fist. She wasn't just a guest. She was living here. She was settling in, and Ethan was letting her. At dinner that night, I watched them laugh together, watched Ethan pour her wine, watched her touch his arm lightly. My fork trembled in my hand. My heart raced. My vision blurred slightly with unshed tears. I realized in that moment that I was already alone, that I'd been left behind inside my own marriage, sitting quietly in the wreckage while they played house. The heartbreak didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, each sharper than the last. And with every wave, something inside me hardened. Because soon, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was angry. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. I walked in early from work, arms full of groceries, and found them in the kitchen. Sabrina perched on the counter, Ethan between her knees, laughing softly. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. My heart stopped. This wasn't love. It was exposure. He stammered, "Babe, it's not what it looks like." But I could hear the lie crack in his voice. Sabrina slid off the counter, cheeks flushed, smoothing her hair. I stood frozen in the doorway, bag slipping from my fingers, hearing the sound of fruit rolling across the floor. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom, shaking, gasping for breath. I stared into the mirror, seeing a woman I didn't recognize, pale, broken, humiliated. I thought of every time Ethan had gaslighted me. "You're overreacting, Clara. She's just a friend. You're imagining things." I realized then how much I had been manipulated, how carefully he'd crafted the lie, how Sabrina had walked into our home like a guest but stayed like a queen, and how I had been left standing on the sidelines pretending it wasn't happening. I texted Lena, fingers trembling. "You were right." She called instantly, her voice fierce. "Clara, come stay with me. Get out of there." But I shook my head. Not yet. I wasn't leaving in shame. I spent the next few days watching them, silent, calculating, noticing everything, the way they moved together when they thought I wasn't looking, the private smiles, the touches, the betrayal so obvious now. I hated myself for ever doubting my instincts. But under the heartbreak, something else was rising. Rage. Cold, clean rage. The kind that sharpens you. The kind that steadies your hands. The kind that prepares you to end things on your terms. I knew what I had to do, and I was going to do it quietly, precisely, without giving them the satisfaction of my tears. The house felt like a stranger's place. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching the edges of a life I no longer belonged to. They underestimated the woman they betrayed. Ethan and Sabrina floated through the days carefree, laughing, softly, brushing past me as if I were invisible. At night, I lay in bed while Ethan slept beside me, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Anniversaries, vacations, smiles that now looked fake. My heart ached, but the clarity was undeniable. We weren't partners anymore. We hadn't been for a long time. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped hoping for explanations. I stopped giving Ethan the benefit of the doubt. Every move he made, every lie he told, every little betrayal Sabrina wore on her smug smile, it all became fuel. Lena's texts came every day. "When are you leaving?" Do you want me to come over? I kept replying, not yet. Because something inside me needed to do this on my own. I needed to end it without help, without tears, without making myself small. I watched as Ethan left receipts on the counter, for dinners he claimed were work events, for gifts Sabrina now wore, around the house. I saw it all, took it all in, and stayed quiet. But not because I was weak. I was planning. The heartbreak had hollowed me out, yes. But in that hollow space, something cold and fierce was building. A resolve I hadn't known I was capable of. Stood one night in the doorway, watching Ethan and Sabrina laugh over a movie. They didn't even glance at me. And in that moment, the last shred of love I had for him snapped clean. He had already left me emotionally. Now I was going to make sure he saw me leave physically. That weekend, while Ethan and Sabrina were out, a quick errand he didn't bother explaining, I stood in our bedroom with a quiet, steady focus. That was the moment everything changed. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was ready. I pulled out the spare suitcases from the closet. The ones we used on vacations I now knew were half lies. I packed his things first. The tailored shirts, the polished shoes, the cologne Sabrina had probably picked out. Then hers, the scattered clothes she'd left in my drawers, the hairbrush on my vanity, the earrings on my nightstand. As I folded their belongings, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. This wasn't rage-fueled or messy. This was precise, controlled. A quiet reclaiming of space they thought they'd stolen without consequence. I placed the bags neatly by the door, lining them up like a silent statement. Then I went to the dresser, pulled out the folder Lena had helped me prepare. Divorce papers, signed, sealed, ready to deliver. I laid them carefully on the bed, right where Ethan would see them first when he walked in. No note, no explanation, no emotional outburst. Just a clean, sharp ending. I took one last look around the room, letting the memories flicker and fade. The nights I waited for him to come home, the mornings I made coffee alone, the 1,000 tiny heartbreaks I'd swallowed quietly. I picked up my keys, grabbed my overnight bag, and headed to the door. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. From freedom, from the sheer cutting release of knowing I wasn't staying in a life that no longer fit. Before I left, I glanced once at the divorce papers on the bed. I smiled faintly, whispering to myself, "You did it, Clara." And then, without a word, I walked away. I waited at Lena's apartment that night, curled up on her couch, phone silent in my lap. Part of me wondered when Ethan would notice, when he'd walk in, see the packed bags, spot the divorce papers, and realize the game was over. I just smiled, because they had no idea. When the first call came, I let it ring. When the second came, I watched the screen light up. Ethan. I set the phone down gently, letting it buzz, feeling no urge to pick it up. He'd lied, manipulated, gaslighted me for so long. He didn't deserve to hear my voice now. Lena poured us wine, her eyes sharp and proud. "You did it," she said softly. I nodded, swallowing the strange mix of grief and triumph swirling in my chest. Yes, I did. Ethan's texts started rolling in. "Clara, where are you? What is this? Come home so we can talk." I laughed quietly to myself. Home? There was no home left. He'd dismantled it piece by piece. I just finished the job he started. Sabrina texted too. One short passive-aggressive line. "Wow, mature move, Clara." I set the phone down again, shaking my head. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I'd collapse, beg, fight, fall apart. But I didn't. I stayed silent. I stayed still. I let the weight of my absence be the loudest thing in the room. I imagined Ethan walking through the house, seeing the empty drawers, the cleared shelves, the bare spaces where my things had been. Seeing the divorce papers waiting calmly on the bed, no dramatic note, no angry accusations. Just the truth. The power shift was complete. He no longer held me in place with his charm or his lies. I had taken myself out of the equation entirely, and that, I realized, was the purest form of revenge. Not hurting him, not exposing him, not screaming at him, but walking away, whole, while he scrambled to understand how he lost everything. I watched the sunrise from Lena's balcony the next morning. A quiet cup of coffee in my hands, the world slowly waking up. He lost a wife. I reclaimed a life. That thought settled deep into my chest, warm and steady. I hadn't answered Ethan's messages. I hadn't called back. I hadn't checked social media to see the fallout. For once, I wasn't interested in the noise. I was interested in the silence, the clean, soft space I'd carved out by finally, fully letting go. I thought about the woman I'd been just weeks ago. Anxious, aching, gaslighted into shrinking herself, desperate to believe that love could survive any betrayal. That woman had been dismantled, piece by painful piece. But in her place stood someone new. Someone who didn't beg for answers, didn't wait for apologies, didn't need Ethan or Sabrina or anyone else to validate her strength. Lena joined me on the balcony, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "You're so calm," she murmured. I smiled faintly, staring at the pale light blooming across the sky. "I'm free," I whispered back. And it was true. Maybe for the first time in years. I knew there would be grief later. There would be days I missed the idea of Ethan, the life we'd built, the promises he'd shattered. But today, there was only peace. I had walked away without a fight, without a scene, without letting them pull me down into their chaos. I had left the papers, packed the bags, and stepped into a future entirely, beautifully my own. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not revenge, not exposure, not making them pay. Just reclaiming myself. Quietly, fully, unapologetically. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill my lungs. And for the first time, I smiled. Not for Ethan, not for anyone watching, but for me, because this wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was rebirth.